Ali Abdul made a statement talking to Nick, which got me intrigued and I want to discuss it. Essentially, when it comes to Obsidian, it's open source as much as it really can be when it comes to what you can do with it. So community developers, community plugins all over the place can develop the tool, add, subtract, times, divide with Obsidian. And Obsidian developers have been very open and said, we are going to be as custom as you want, except from the main core Obsidian. The main core Obsidian is going to be them, licensing, etc., which totally makes sense. But everything else with Obsidian, you can customize. So that's why everyone's Obsidian can look drastically different with who knows how many plugins.
Yeah.
But Ali said that he was looking to buy some equity of a note-taking app. And that was the section that Ali and Nick spoke about Obsidian. It was the section, for those curious, it's in Nick's podcast. He's got it on YouTube, and it's at minute 24:28, and it lasts about 2 minutes. That's the entirety of Ali's relationship with Obsidian, about 2 minutes worth. And the majority of that is talking about buying equity in, well, he was thinking Obsidian, but Obsidian, as he mentions, doesn't suit buying out equity because it's open source. But he's looking to buy equity in other note-taking tools. And that's the conversation I wanted to talk about. Like, when it comes to the note-taking world, the note-taking app, I understand the developers having equity in the app because obviously they develop the thing. But if you're talking about equity and ownership of an app, if you're looking at Obsidian, does that mean every developer that has created a community plugin should, could, would have equity in Obsidian? That just doesn't sound right. Because, I mean, the way Obsidian works, anyone can make CSS code or some JavaScript code to make Obsidian work the way they want. Like the CSS additions that I have inside of my vault, does that mean I should have some equity in it? That just sounds silly.
I think also it brings on bigger questions. Like, he talks about productivity, or has done for a very long time. And if he has equity in a productivity map.
App. You said map.
No, I said app. In a productivity app.
Oh, it sounded like map, and I was like, we're not talking about the graph here.
Like, he would have to, I would, if I was in his shoes, stop talking about productivity. At least from an app standpoint. I would speak less about productivity apps due to being, in the space.
I think that, though, is where I'm gonna pin that for a second. When it comes to Obsidian as an app, I don't think it's a productivity app. Like it's one thing it could be, but the majority of users, as we've discussed before, of Obsidian are not, hey, look at my productivity, my life organization, I put everything in Obsidian app. It's, I do this to help with my writing. I found out on Thursday, so a couple of days ago for me, Tom Nicholas, massive YouTube creator, got 400,000 plus subscribers, is a political commentator, does lots of video essays around political topics, specifically in the UK, uses Obsidian, doesn't have any community plugins, doesn't use the graph view, wasn't aware of the canvas, but has been using Obsidian for over a year to write his scripts because he uses it as a writing tool, just like Microsoft Word. When you look at CGP Grey, someone else, another big creator, same sort of thing. He doesn't rave about it. You'd have to go through one of his state of the apps podcast things, which are like 3 hours long, and he mentions it like an hour and a half in. It's not a big staple sort of in your face, I use this productivity app. It's a, yeah, I use Obsidian, so what? and
I
that's...
think this is one of the things that I really recognize when moving from Notion to Obsidian. I think we've discussed this before. Like, here's what I've got.
Yeah.
It's so almost dull in terms of, yeah, this is just what I use. It's not showy. It doesn't even make sense to be showy with it. It's just, yeah, this is how it works. This is how I work. Here you go. This is what it looks like. Cool.
Even with last week, like last week, people could say, "Oh, it was a showy week of Obsidian." Yeah, but when you actually look at the what you're doing, which is where we got to, it's exactly the same as me, exactly the same as everyone else. You have a file with words up, and then you bring another file with words up, and you type. That's it. Whereas in Notion, you don't really have that. It's you have a database on one side that you open up to edit the page, or you have a gallery view in a database where you edit some properties, or you drag things in Kanban views. Maybe you have just a page up and then another tab with a page up to write, but most of the time you're zipping in and out of databases or trying to navigate your way through pages, whereas Obsidian most of the time is just writing. And that to me is a writing tool. It's, yes, it could be classed as a productivity tool, but it's a writing tool. And if you want equity in a writing tool, why go to something like Obsidian? What Word, notebook, like WikiPad? There are so many different apps out there. I'm not sure where the benefit, I guess, would come from. I'm not in the financial side of the note-taking app worlds, but when you look at Evernote, people took equity in Evernote, and what happened to that? Got more
Bye-bye.
expensive, more expensive, more expensive, and now it's gone.
That's crazy.
I mean, it's not gone, but yeah, mass exodus of Evernote. Uh, so as soon as you start bringing in like money, equity, and funding to tools, note-taking tools that are built specifically for people rather than companies, it turns the tool into a company tool, into an organizational tool. And
Because that's what happens, because that's actually where the money is. And then it grows
exactly.
bigger, and then it becomes not what it was originally built for. What is no longer a scrappy little tool that is scrappy and is flexible and is customizable. It turns into something that is designed for big, massive corporations because that's where the money is. And that is my argument for what happened to Notion.
Mm-hmm.
Because now Notion is focused, although there's some great features and although there's some nice things, it's now so focused on the corporate side, it's kind of forgotten where it came from in a way.
Yes, I agree. I don't think it's forgotten where it came from. I think it's deliberately chosen
Yeah,
to ignore them.
yeah, I agree.
And I know that sounds harsh, but that's to me what it is. Because when we're looking a very big sideways jump here, ecological dynamics, when you say forgotten, have they really forgotten? Or have they made a decision to go in a different direction because of the relationship they have with the new environment? I
Yeah,
would argue that's what it is.
they have very much taken a different,
They've
yeah,
seen the money and gone, yep, we'll go over there now.
which is a shame,
Yeah, and
but it is
it's
what it is.
exactly, it's what happens, which brings me back to that point I pinned for a second. When we say creator, this is something I was discussing yesterday. I am shifting my view on what a creator is. Because when I look at creators on YouTube, the traditional view of a creator is a person in front of a camera talking to their audience. However, when you look at newspapers, news articles, and anything to do with other like mainstream media, you wouldn't call them a creator. You have reporters, presenters, researchers, journalists, and then producers. And then you have the organization that owns, to what extent, those people working in the positions to share information on their media account.
Yeah,
You look at Mr. Beast, he is not a creator, in my
no,
view. He is a media organization. He is the CEO of the media outlet that is Mr. Beast. Yes, he's the face of it, but you could say Elon Musk is the face of Tesla. That doesn't make Elon Musk an engineer. He's the face of Tesla. So creators I don't think should be a role, a term that is used. I don't like what that sets up, because creators and organizations are drastically different in the way that we've perceived what those words mean.
Mm.
So when I look at people like Ali as a creator, is
I
he?
don't know.
Does he do the things that we
Decisions
would
he's
expect?
making, the decisions he's making are not a creator decision. They are a business decision, business choices.
He is, to me, the CEO or whatever position he's given himself of the business that is Ali Abdaal, and the media organization that is sharing content online that is Ali Abdaal, which there's nothing wrong with that. But it does mean that inside this creator industry, I would call it media industry because that's what it is. It's an alternative media rather than mainstream media. Well, now Ali has responsibilities and standards that other organizations need to uphold. And it's the same for every other creator that is putting media out, including myself, including us doing this right here. Like, no, we're not earning tons of money. I mean, we're not earning anything from this because we're not monetized on YouTube. But if we do earn money, it actually, no, scratch that. It's not if we do. It's because we're sharing information online. I think we have standards and not necessarily qualifications, but integrity to uphold with the information that we're sharing online. Otherwise, it's a mishmash. It's a wild west of who knows what goes on, disinformation everywhere. So as an organization of the two of us, we have job roles. We have roles.
Yeah, big organization.
Oh yeah, huge, world changing. But we have roles, and where this for me is starting to evolve my thinking around this is that at the start, yes, it's one person. At that one person is a creator, and that creator is an organization. It's a media organization, but the person is doing all of the jobs, doing all of the roles.
Yeah.
As soon as you add another person to that, now it's not a creator. Now it's an organization. Whether it is a freelance editor or a person helping with the writing, you're now an organization because you have two people that need to uphold standards when you're sharing content. This is a stance that I'm developing. And Ali is well beyond that point. Nick is well beyond that point. They are media organizations to me because they have teams behind them. So when we look at buying equity in a note-taking app, it's an organization buying equity in a note-taking app. It's not a creator. It's not a person. It's not an individual. It's an organization. When you reframe it like that, I personally get a different feel.
Mm. Mm.
Now it
Mm.
now it doesn't feel as, oh yeah, that creator's doing this thing. No, it's an organization. For those unfamiliar with the creator industry, there are loads of examples of creators, or dubbed creators, either having creating products or having equity in products they've created. The recent, I don't know whether you call it scandal, but kerfuffle was about Pokimane. She decided to create a product, a food product of cookies, but it was essentially the exact same product as something else. But she said that it was brand new. She'd been working on it for years and she has equity in that product. So she wants it to sell. So she markets said product because she's an organization. She's a media organization trying to earn money. Products being a way to earn money. So I feel like the creator word is a fluffy word people are using to disguise potentially what it is that they're really doing. They're businesses, they're organizations, they're media organizations, alternative media organizations that are independent, and they want to try and bypass some of the mainstream expectations and standards that are upheld in typical organizations, which sounds really conspiratorial, but it's the way it is, really.
Mm.
So Obsidian, I love the fact that it's open source and the organizations can't take hold. And that's what Capano has said. They don't want VC funding. They don't want capital investment. They don't want any of that to impinge how the app develops.
And you can tell.
Mm.
Just by using it, you can tell.
Yep.
So, question for you.
I'm like cheering it on. Before you get to that question, I'm loving. I know they said databases were on the roadmap, but I'm loving the look of the table view. It's basically advanced tables, but better. Like, oh, I'm looking forward to that. I hope actual database type things come to it, but yeah, I'm loving the look of that. Can't wait. And we'll talk about metadata menu after your question.
So, obviously, you've got the developer plugin developer world, and we've had one person, TFT Hacker, producing a paid plugin.
Yes, I don't know whether I class it as a plugin or a template because it's CSS. It's basically CSS inside of a vault that allows you to see the canvas in a different way, which you could say it's a theme, you could say it's a plugin, a combination of the two. I'm not really sure how it works. Yeah, product.
Would you like to see more of that happening in the Obsidian world?
Would I like to see more? I think there are two answers to this, because there's the answer as the user, which is no. And
Obviously.
then there, yeah, because I don't want to be paying for an app that's free. But then there's the answer of the media organization, the creator in me, that says yes, because the developers that are putting in all of this time and all of this work to developing tools that help lots of people should be paid for it. They should be getting money for it. They should be supported for their work. And I don't publicly say this because I don't think I need too much, but I pay developers. So the apps, the plugins that I use, I support the developers via either buy me a coffee or GitHub donations. I send the money because I use the tools a lot, and it just it feels appropriate. Whether other people are going to do that, it depends on their financial situations, etc., etc. But I think the developers should be supported in some way. But then you open up questions about how, where, when, what, with all of that. Because some of the developers don't maintain their plugins. Some of the developers get other people to maintain their plugins. And you could argue the development of a plugin then becomes a sort of a mini organization in itself, because you've got 3 or 4 people working on a plugin. But some of those people are working on their own plugins as well. It's very much just a community of work. So I am in a crossroads with those two answers. I personally don't think money should be brought in to the plugin world, to the plugin theme developer world. I don't think money should be brought in there. I think money should sit with the product space of of Obsidian products. So the templates that I would say sell, but I don't sell because you can buy them for free. The products that I offer that people can buy if they want, they can be charged. And I would class the canvas that TFT Hacker has created as a product. It's an Obsidian product. Nick's LYT kit is a product. I don't think they are, they're not needed to use Obsidian at all. They don't enhance Obsidian in the same way where you just plug and play like a theme or a plugin. It's you've got to figure out some sort of philosophy, understanding, workflow. It's a product. You've got to really work with the product. And I'm still to work with the Canvas product. I haven't dived deep into it. So the way I see Obsidian's products and development are two different sides of Obsidian, alongside obviously the Obsidian development itself. You have core development, community development, and then community plugins, community products, sorry.
Yeah.
Where I like money in there is supporting core development, because supporting it, whether either through sync or publish or through donations to Obsidian. I'm a VIP member, so I have donated to them. So supporting core development and supporting community development through
Yeah.
use.
Yeah.
Through use, through community, through engagement, rather than money.
And I really like how TFT Hacker like did the product. If you are part of the Obsidian community, you create content, you get it for free. Because it is very much handing it back to the community, which I think is a fantastic like way of doing it.
It's community driven, and that, as an organization, that is what I would love to see more do.
Yeah.
We can see everywhere the organizations that have the biggest critiques are the ones that struggle the most with community.
I'm seeing Notion going in that direction.
What do you
When
mean?
you look at what Notion was previously, the community is perhaps not quite what it was.
Oh, certainly not. It's
There's a lot
certainly
of
changed.
there's a lot of thrifters and grifters looking, give me money because I'm a Notion person, versus the community space that it was back when it started.
Well, Notion grew off of creators and community conversation. They didn't market things. They do now, but they didn't start with that.
No. And still, I would argue that a lot of how Notion becomes used is due to the creators, like people who actively create content inside of Notion and talk about it. It's
Yeah.
still through them versus even with the VC back funding and all that
Money.
that they get, it doesn't do a very good job. It's the creators that are doing it.
Yeah. And that is where I feel Obsidian, I don't know whether Obsidian will last longer, but I can see Obsidian being like the Evernote of 2030. Everyone sort of just using it because it works, it does the job, it's not flashy, it does what it needs to do. But Obsidian can be flashy, which is why I think it superseded Evernote. So I see Obsidian somewhat replacing Evernote in 2030, and Notion being the Trello, Asana, ClickUp-esques
Yeah.
of 2030. It's, hey, there's this organization that you could use it. It's just a tool that everyone expects companies to use. But people in the community don't want to use it. It's there because they need to. It'll be like Loop, Microsoft Loop. Obviously, they're doing a lot of that already, bringing it in.
When you look at ClickUp, the new version of ClickUp looks like Notion.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like Notion, just fine. It's just like, oh,
That's one of those things that I think Obsidian. I know we're talking about Obsidian a lot, but obviously it's the tools that we use. Obsidian does so well. It's the only app that does it well to have tabs, have panes, have workspaces, move plugins, and it's just a visual space that you can adapt. It's an editable, a visual writing space, which, from what I can see, no other app does well. The other apps that have brought in sidebars and tabs, it's janky. It's when you snap something across an Obsidian, it's fluid. It works, and you can do it multiple times. You can have so many different windows open with tabs and panes. But when you try and do it in so many other apps, one of the windows gets slow, or the tabs sort of it jars, it clicks into space. Sometimes it jumps down pages here and there. It takes a second, like just a second, to figure out what it is you're trying to do, and it feels clunky. It feels janky. It doesn't feel fluid, unlike Obsidian. And maybe some people will argue, yeah, but that app's only been developed. Well, that app's just coming out of beta. Well, Obsidian had this at 0.9 version. It was still in beta. It was still extremely fluid with the way that it worked. It's built on like fluid interactions between pages, files, tabs, panes, and workspaces. Yes, you see some odd interactions when you have multiple windows open, but that's somewhat expected when you're like me and you have 3 windows open with like 4 tabs. But not everyone's going to be like me. Most people are going to have an Obsidian open with tabs and panes. That core functionality is, to me, what sets Obsidian apart as a writing tool.
Yeah. And also, goes without saying, we're biased.
Yeah. Yeah.
Massively. Massively, massively, massively.
And I'm open about that.
Yeah.
Maybe what we should do, because in my video essays I'm putting conflicts of interest, is I should put a disclaimer at the description saying conflict of interest. We like Obsidian.
We like Obsidian. And I don't use Obsidian as a, like, it's not even a project manager or a task manager anymore. I use Morgan for that.
That's actually interesting. Have you watched the PPV build vault that I
No,
published?
no.
Okay, because obviously in my emails I see, because I'm using Threadcar, I see how many people download it as a template. And the templates that I have out all over YouTube, I can see them being downloaded here and there. And I was expecting a couple of people to download the PPV template. No, I got like hundreds of people, and I'm like, what? Because it's a database style vault in Obsidian. And what's somewhat, it's mind-blowing when I initially think about it, but when I go a little bit deeper, I understand it, is that my personal setup inside of Obsidian has less downloads, having been up for almost half a year, than the PPV vault that's been up for like 2 days. And I think it's because PPV is built off of Notion rather than Obsidian. Which,
Yes.
I mean, I understand, but it's so inefficient. I built it, I built the vault because people asked for it, not because I wanted to build it. It was more of a, I know I can do this. I know it's easy to do this, but other people that don't know Obsidian won't be able to do this. So I'm going to build it for them to sort of kickstart them going. I, it's not that I didn't want to share it. It's, I don't want to push people to use it because I think it's inefficient. It's an inefficient use of Obsidian. And I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this. I have features in there that work just like Notion, but I didn't want to build them.
Yeah.
It's
That's why I never watched it. Because I'm just like, why would I want to remake PPV? I hated one, I hated PPV. Never made sense. It was too granular for me. Like I had no desire to use it ever. I respect the idea. It's fine. It's a fine idea. It's a fine system, but it is nowhere near ever going to work for me.
I think there are a couple of things in there for those using Obsidian, the Vault anyway, that they could use, such as the data view queries. Obviously, they would be
Yes.
helpful to understanding how I've used data view for that. And I think some of the metadata menu setups for essentially filtering down the link that you can search for.
That's true.
Those things, because inside of Obsidian, it's not, okay, now the database is related to that database. It's, you can search the entire vault, pick a file. So if you do want to filter it down, working out how I filtered those things down, which I did it very simply and just used folders because those people that are going in there don't really want a really complicated data view JavaScript type query inside of a metadata setting. Like that's not going to help people get started.
But that would be more efficient.
Well, I wouldn't even do it. I wouldn't even put in the properties. I would just have the link inside of the file.
Yeah.
I would just link the thing. Well, yeah, I mean, the way it's set up is it's set up that you have projects, you have tasks, you have vaults of information. And I wouldn't want to link value goals, outcome goals with projects, linking with tasks. I I don't see the point of linking them in the properties, which is the way it's done in Notion, because you can just put the project in the goal, or you can just have a tick box of does this match the outcome goal or the value goal, or you can just have the link in the file, like outcome goals, these projects are related to that. Done. You don't need to be complicated and add data view queries and property links. No, just have a file, outcome goals, and then have a file of project 1, project 2, project 3, and then in outcome goals you put project 1, project 2, project 3. And then if you want to make sure you don't miss a project, have a simple data view query that looks for files that have not been linked to an outcome goal. Like, you don't need all the complicated stuff. But if you want it to look like Obsidian, look like Notion, and function like Notion, then you do. But yeah, metadata menu. It's working on a version 2.
Oh.
There are some things I don't like about it. There are some things I do like about it. I'm not going to talk about too much about the features because the sort of nuanced features, because obviously they're subject to change and I don't want people to get too excited. However, there are 3 new fields that I know I can talk about, which if you're like me, you'll go, I don't get it. Okay? YAML fields, JSON fields, and object fields. Go on, say it.
I don't get it. Well, why? Why YAML? Why?
So this is going to get a little bit technical, because if you don't understand Obsidian, this will go well over your heads. A property in Obsidian is in the YAML. It's at the top of the file. And the way properties work is you have a key, i.e. the name of the field, and the value, the thing that's in the field. So you've got tag, colon, thing, key, and then value. But because of the way YAML works, if you have bullet point lists, for example, it needs to be in speech marks. So Obsidian knows, okay, that's the key, and these are multiple values as a list. If you want to do anything else, so if you want to have a key inside of a key, for example, you can't do it with Obsidian properties because that requires an object, because the first key is an object and the second key can then be used as a key rather than a value. Right?
Yeah.
Still with me? So what this means is that inside of a YAML field, you can have lists of fields. Right? So you could have a drop-down list of different fields. So you could have status 1, status 2, status 3 as fields inside of a list, the list being status type. Then you select video status type, and that then gives you the video status. Or you can select article status type, and that gives you the article field, the article list, rather than needing 2 classes and having a parent class and a subclass.
Okay, that's cool.
You do it all in one field. So when you click on the button, you get a list, but the list
I quite like that.
is of another list. So it's essentially, it's a drop down in a drop down.
Cool.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because it's objects, you can do as many drop downs in drop downs as you want, or you can essentially have a class, because a class is a file that has fields. You can have a
Yeah.
class in a drop down because you can have a set of fields in a field because it's an object. Massive inception going on right there. And that's the YAML fields. That's the object fields. So you would be able to nest classes in a class. I can already see people going, oh, I'll just have one class then and have tons of object fields inside of it, which I have not tested. I've not gone through, but it's a potential possibility where you could just say, okay, I'm going to have one class and just add to it.
Isn't that what MetaBind is?
MetaBind?
Yeah. Plugin.
Potentially. I don't know. I'm not familiar with it.
Oh,
But
I
when it,
suppose it's an input of views in notes, whereas this is in the properties. So it's kind of
yeah.
that, but not that.
So it's in the YAML. And so Dovos, if you're listening, Dovos, I know, is using object data in properties for data view because data view uses objects and stuff. I don't really fully grasp what's going on inside of the data view object stuff because everything's an object. When you start using flatten and group by and all those different functions and stuff inside of data view. But because Obsidian properties don't have objects, it's difficult to use the properties, like Obsidian properties itself. And that, I think, was one of the reasons Dovos doesn't like using metadata menu, because there's no objects in it, because it's just YAML properties. But now, with this version 2, there is objects. And what that means is the drop-down list, the property list of the databases that you could use inside of Obsidian would be way more powerful than Notion.
Mm.
If you imagine nested properties inside of a Notion database, that's essentially what this metadata menu version 2 is doing. It's nesting properties inside of a property.
I mean, they do have that now with 2.0 formulas,
In what way?
but not to the same. Well, you can go into different properties in the formula property.
Well, yeah, but isn't that just doing a lookup?
It's a little bit more funky than that and kind of cool.
Okay,
But
explain.
you could do lists of them like you would be able to in the other. Because you could actually do, so instead of having a roll up or a relation, you can use formula. From my limited understanding and limited exploration, you can have, basically, you go into the property of another database or the same database, and then look at the properties of that, like what other things it can have. So you can
Right.
kind of do relations within a formula.
So what would the formula show? What's the output?
I'm not entirely sure. I would assume it would be whatever you want it to be.
Right. So you'd use a formula to do a calculated lookup to find information. Right. Yeah, no, that's an output, which, I mean, yeah, I guess that would work. That's a lot of coding though. That would be a lot of formula coding, I would imagine. Well, not necessarily a lot when it comes to like characters and symbols, but it would be a lot to understand how to do that.
Yes.
Yeah, metadata menu is, I mean,
You press the button, go beep, and then it's done.
yeah. Yeah, you just push the button and you get the drop down list. So
Yes.
it's an editable list. It's not just an
It's
output.
not like that, but it does have that functionality now in Notion, which, as long as you know how to do it, you just buy everyone's course on it and you're fine.
Yeah, so I'm excited about what this metadata menu version 2 comes out with. However, there are some limitations that I'm not a fan of. But I think they're going to be somewhat rectified in future developments. But I still really need to find actual use cases for those fields. because it's really difficult to explain that to someone that doesn't understand objects and stuff inside of
I'm
Obsidian.
still trying to figure out how I would want to use it. I don't think I
Exactly.
would.
Well, it's one of those field types where if you've got a use case for it, it's so useful. But if you don't, it's like, so what?
Yeah.
It's similar with the canvas fields. The canvas fields are great if you have a use case for it. But if not, so what?
Mm.
I created a storyboard, I guess you could say, overview of the book that I'm writing using the canvas field types. Didn't like it at all. Like I made it and it was fun, it worked, but from a practical standpoint, just didn't make sense. So to bring some tangibility here, I had a chapter file and the group was chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and I moved the chapter file into the group and it gave the file the chapter number, which was great. It worked fine. But I'm writing inside of Obsidian with the longform plugin. So when I move the chapter in the longform plugin, it doesn't move it in the canvas. So I had to move it twice. It just didn't make sense.
Meh.
But unfortunately, I can't find a way to extract the long form numbering into the file because
That might be a use case.
potentially, but it's all in the index file. So longform looks at the index file of the longform project folder
Okay.
and it moves the information up and down. Rather than it being embedded in each individual file, it's just in one index file that the longform plugin uses. So I would need to be in some way be able to map the index from longform to the files themselves, or surface the longform index information in a data view query, which I'm like, I don't know how to do that.
No.
Which, I mean, that might be a Davos question or a data view question, but yeah, so, but yeah, it's like those fields are really cool when you find a use. And I think I may have found a use that's actually useful, as it were, with my, I'm going to call it a character map because that's what I'm doing with the fantasy book. I have a character map because it started out as a family tree, and then I just added more and more characters to it because I was like, I need to understand the interactions between these characters because I'm getting lost. There are too many things going on here. So I've got groups for like, this is the family A, this is family B, these are the parents in like a group inside of the group. These are the children group inside. So I've got like a child group, a parent group, a grandparent group inside of the big group that is the family. And then those people are linked with other people with relationships, like brother, sister. I haven't said those unless it's explicit. So when there's things that are a little bit more complicated, so like step great aunts, for example, I'm not going to remember that off the top of my head. So I've drawn a line of like step great aunt or second brother twice removed sort of thing. I put those things in there. And as characters have started to build out, I'm like, oh, so this setting has these characters in, but these characters relate to those family people in different ways. So I've got the colors in there, the colors of the blank cards with the file names in to say, okay, that's a good person, that's a bad person, that's a neutral person. And then the characters are linked in different ways in the groups, and I can see everything, like all the relationships between the characters in one place. But what I'm missing inside of my character view, so I have a data view table that shows all of my characters, is I know when they're mapped because there's a tick box and I can see, yes, they're mapped. But I don't always see the main group, as it were, that they're in. Like what actually are they? Which I could do with a metadata field.
Yeah.
And then I can add things to that field and say, okay, if something comes out the top of this character file, it relates to relationships, or it relates to something else. Or if it comes out to the left side of this character file, it relates to this thing. So the character map can feed into the information that comes in my data view table.
Mm.
That cannot be done in any other writing app.
No, I have some fun questions for you.
Go
Because
for it.
I'm working on something right now, for D&D, which I'm bringing the NPCs. I was watching this lecture on kind of NPC and character design and a whole this idea that Ken Levine had around star NPCs that have an affinity, and depending on what you do, there are certain thresholds, etc., etc. Kind of very RPG like, and I'm like, I like that. And what you do influences groups of people but the main people you have to pay attention to are the groups of fights. So kind of like factions in different video games. And I'm like, yes, I'm going to do that for the worlds that I'm creating in D&D. So I'm like, okay, cool. How do I track that in Obsidian? was my next question. And I'm like, properties. So we're gonna have a nice little chat afterwards, and we'll figure it out. Because I'm like, I want to track affinities. So they get to a certain threshold, it triggers a threshold, so a thing will happen, which will be in the note itself. But being able to see what the current affinity is and what the threshold level they're at would be really cool.
This might be because I'm more familiar with metadata menu than you, but you could
Yes,
do that in just a number field. Have a number field.
that's
Uh,
what I thought, but I just need to think it out loud at someone.
yeah. Yeah. So the way I would approach that is you have a value that you want to get to, which is just a piece of metadata that would go into the file, whether that's called affinity or whatever. Add the number in, and then you can have a data view query that is searching for that metadata field and says, if this is above this number, show it. Yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
so you can immediately see what characters, whoever, is above said number or is below said number. And if you want to go really nerdy with it, because you have the lookup field inside of Obsidian, you can look up field values for those characters.
It would be good to have like the NPC, and so the number dictates which threshold, because there's a plus, a positive threshold, and a negative threshold, and depending on what level they get, will trigger a threshold. So it'll either be -1 or bad threshold 1. This is what's going to happen. Good threshold 1. This is what's going to happen, and it kind of goes out from there. It's staggered, so it's not. You get a pretty instant reaction at first, which is a little thing, and then it gets big as it goes out. It gets bigger reactions. So being able to see which threshold they're at will be
Are
interesting.
there limits to the numbers?
I will put limits to the numbers, yes.
Because what I'm thinking, if you like the canvas interaction style of things, is
Oh, that's
you could have groups of numbers, say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then have the file in the canvas and then just move it up and down, which will obviously
oh,
change the
that's true.
number. So that means you could then move it so you could have like those numbered groups going down the canvas, and then each of those star NPCs files, and just move them left or right, so you can see at a glance what characters are where in the numbers, and then if you move
And
them,
how
that
close
changes.
they are to the next threshold and bad things happening.
Exactly. So you
And
could
it's
get an
easier than
overview
having
of
to
that.
click in there and do the +1 and the -1 and all that crap. I
Yeah, so
just
instead of clicking, you could move it across. So that's something that you could use inside of the canvas with a canvas field, because you could use groups. Or to be more snaky, you could just use canvas cards and then just use the link, because you can have it with a link to as well, files that link to things rather than having to drag it across. So you could do it any way you want, really, whether you, like, say, use a field or use a canvas. Both work. That's the power of metadata menu. It gives you so much flexibility.
nice. I'm gonna go
But
set that up. I
yes.
thought it was simple because I was overthinking. I could tell I was like, I know this is really easy, and there are so many ways we could do this, but I cannot figure out for the life of me what I'm doing.
That's one of those things though, when it comes to using Obsidian, because there is so much complexity if you go
Nah,
deep.
nah, complexibility. That is correct.
Complexability, okay. But yeah,
That's so Obsidian. Complexibility.
yes, it's high in complexability. I like that word.
Yeah, it's nice word.
Yeah, I stopped myself from saying it because obviously it's not a word, but yeah. But yeah, so because Obsidian has a lot of complexability, there there's this I guess pull towards making it complicated, making it automatic, and all this. No, what I'm actually doing with my writing and numbering the chapters is I just have a number field. It just says number, and then I type in the number where it is. It's like 7-1, 7-2, 7-3. That's where the scene is. If I want to change it, I just go in and change the number. It's now 6-4. Rather than doing the whole drag drop thing and automatically changing everything else. It would be nice to automatically change things, but what I found is when I do the automatic stuff, I want to then change it back. Like sometimes I want to change it back. I want to look back at what it was, and I don't know. I like the control. I like the
So
control
what you're saying is you're a control freak and can't cope with things changing without you doing it.
without me knowing that's what's going on. Yeah. Exactly. Because when things start working in the background, I'm like, is that really working?
Are you
Did
sure?
that
I'm gonna
way?
do that. I know because I'm exactly the same.
Did that work the way I wanted it to work? But that's literally Notion in a nutshell.
Yeah.
I'm
It
checking databases. Did that work? Did that go to where I wanted it? Like,
that's something that I've noticed as I've been doing some Notion work for clients again. I'm coming back in, I'm going into Obsidian, I'm like, oh, are you sure you're doing this right? I'm like, oh yeah, this is Obsidian. It does.
it does exactly what you tell it to do.
And then when I've been planning D&D sessions because I've got a number of them on the go now. And then I come back in and do some work in Notion. I'm just like, oh, so slow.
Were you using Notion for with the D&D?
I'm not, no.
Oh, I was going to say it's online. Like,
No, no, I would have used Notion because it has more constraints, which is useful because I go too far otherwise. But because it's online only, and when I play, I'm disconnected from the internet, and I've only got like my phone to tether, which
you just load the page up, and then you cache it on your device, and then you.
and then half the time it doesn't load the things that I need in the last possible second when I need it. And then it takes half a fucking second just to load anything. When really all I need to do is just open a tab now, press open, type the name of the spell, find the spell, look at the spell, off I go, then I'm done.
Yeah.
And even that is more complicated than me just putting the spells that my characters have as a bookmark and using that, which is one thing that I'm actually going to be setting up because it's easier.
Yep.
Much.
Bookmark groups.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I got confused when we were looking at your vault the other day. Like why you had like files and folders. I'm like, you can't organize them. Just do it in bookmarks.
Because I was still setting it up.
Yep. I know. I do have a video coming out probably at the end of this month when I'm going through the NaNoWriMo stuff because yeah, my book's gonna be 75,000 words, not 50,000. I'm like a third of the way through.
Okay.
Yeah, so even though I'm gonna probably complete NaNoWriMo, I won't have completed what I actually set out to do, which was write a book. So I guess like I win and lose at the same time. But I'm gonna I'm gonna do a writing vault, and it's so simple. It's so basic. It's yeah, you really don't need all the gizmos and gadgets, but they do help. Like long form does help.
Yeah.
Long form does help. Right. I think that's it. I know we went like diverted off into Obsidian, which is kind of expected. When it comes to the organizational thing, I'm going to be doing a video essay about that. So look out for that if you're interested to hear more of my thoughts on that. But yeah, John, any final words?
No, not
Good.
really.
Good word. Good word. Imagine that when an executioner says, "Any final words?" No. Good pick. Good word. Yeah, no, I've been well into the fantasy world, so yeah. Okay, right. See everyone else next week, John. I'm sure we're going to talk Obsidian.
Oh yeah. Bye.
Bye.